Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Daren Miller. It is my honor to make this presentation today. Please accept my apologies for not being able to be there in person, but I have a long-standing commitment this weekend of 39 years that I needed to make it up to just below Yosemite. And so it was important for me to participate in this. And so I appreciate the partnership asking me to be able to do this via Zoom today. And hopefully the information that I provide everybody will help them as through their journey as becoming a candidate and hopefully becoming an elected official. As with anything in life, you need to do homework. You need to do practice. You need to make sure that you understand what it is that you're desiring to do. And in some cases, we as candidates wake up one day disgruntled with either work or with how life is or a debate, a presidential debate, and now we want to jump in and make changes. And I applaud people for wanting to do that, but doing it as a candidate, doing it as an elected official is not always the best or the most timely way to make those things happen. And so people who are wanting to be candidates and run for public office, I always encourage them to do their homework. Make sure that you're going to community meetings, make sure that you're reaching out to community organizations, making sure that you're participatory, and sometimes just showing up to an event. We have lots of different events that we have here, progressive side of the ledger, that I would encourage people to get out to these different events and see what's going on, so that people see you, who you are, but also so that you learn and understand all aspects of what's going on with this very, 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 very diverse community that we live in. I go out to a lot of different community events. Being involved in education over the last 30 plus years provides me an opportunity to go to different aspects of our community and watch people. And so people who are going to be candidates, I want to make sure that they are present, that they're not just going to raise funds, that they're not just going to the big events, that they're not just going to the events that are also, that they're easy and comfortable with. As a candidate, when I was participating as a candidate, I went to the Hmong New Year. I went to the Hmong clan meetings. I've gone to LGBT meetings and fundraisers and socials, although I'm not part of the LGBT community. Obviously I'm part of the African American community here in Fresno, and I think it's important that I get outside of that community to make sure that I understand who I'm representing, what I want to do, and then I'm able to do the best job I can. And so as I'm looking for viable candidates, I'm looking for those people who can cross-pollinate, can work with conservatives. I'm on the progressive side of the ledger, but I also pride myself in being able to work with my brothers and sisters that are on the conservative side of the ledger as well. And conversely, those who are on the conservative side, I also want to be able to have observations of them working with the progressive side of the ledger as well, because no community in Fresno, and particularly in the city of Fresno, is a monolithic area, a monolithic group of people. So you've got to be able to cross-pollinate cultural ideas, understanding different cultures and what makes people tick. And so when I'm looking at and I'm assessing viable candidates, those are the types of qualities that I'm looking for. The importance of personal skills is paramount to being a public servant. And people who are not comfortable in crowds, people who are not comfortable cross-pollinating, working with people who are different than them, I don't think that they would be the best candidates. And we've had some examples of that here locally. They are fortunate to get elected, and then when they get in office, you don't hear them, you don't see them involved in activating. And those are the types of people who kind of burn out after one term. Maybe they termed out because they cannot run for that position anymore, and then they disappear. You never see them again. And so what I want to be able to make sure is that people, first of all, understand what it is that they are aspiring to do, and that they can do it. And the only way you can do that is by your evidence, your body of work, the things that you've done, and the things that you are working towards learning to do. What do I stand for? I think that is huge. And I think that a person's sum total of their experiences and what they've been involved in is going to kind of tell you who they are and what they stand for. And not all stances are are going to be representative of the body. A Jim Costa type of personality who has been involved in the federal arena, now thinking that he's going to come back and run for a water board, that's not where his background is. It's not where his personality is. And so we need to make sure also that a person's understanding their ethics, their background, and where they are kind of matches whatever the offices they're going to be running for. Usually in this dynamic, people are aspiring to go up. And I think that as people aspire, our young Dems, our young politicians, as they're aspiring to go up, I don't think that should be their sum total, is to get into office number one with the aspirations that they're going to use office number one and office number two to get to office number three. I think there is a natural progression, a natural alignment of work that's presented in those lower first offices that should accumulate itself, and the community, those who you serve, should be backing you. If you're in elected position number one, and then when you run for elected position number two, you have very small followings out of elected position number one, I'm not sure that you're the right person to be moving on right now, because you obviously didn't make those connections that I think are very vital in that first position that you're elected to. And so, you have all types of different types of accomplishments. We've got a lot of people here recently who have first-time candidates who have been fortunate and blessed to go into different elected positions and serve very well. Some people are starting, they get elected to a 4-year term. All of a sudden, 2 years later, now they're aspiring to go on to something else. I'm not here to judge whether that's good or bad. I just think that there needs to be a deliberate process, and it needs to be supported through the community as people aspire. And so when it comes to ethics and just morality, I think that ultimately gets defined by the amount of support that you have in your previous positions as you aspire to go up the hill. But it is very, 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 very important. We all have morality, a moral foundation that we go off. We may not always agree with it, but we all have that to use as a springboard going forward. But I think the most successful candidates that I can claim are those who did a great job in their first elected position and was able to navigate taking that support that they generated early, going on to their later positions. And so I think that is a very, very, very tricky proposition. What is the right office? What office, if God blesses me to be elected in that position, would it be a natural fit? I think that's a great question. And I don't necessarily have one particular answer to be able to derive that, because we come from all kind of different examples. There's different examples that are out there that I can give you where a person is, such as myself, is in education and then went into civics. They went into a city council. I can tell you that there's people who are in private business who have gone in and run and been very successful on school boards. And so I don't think necessarily an educator needs to be running for educational boards, or a person who is involved in political science and class need to be running for city. I think it all has to do with need is. What's the desire? What did the predecessor in that particular position, what did they do? Some of the big things I think that people need to be aware of is that if you're running for a city council position, that is a job. A county supervisor's job, that is a job. That is a job that is probably going to act just like a regular 8 to 5, 40-hour-a-week job, and then even expanding that. And so I think that a person who is aspiring to those types of levels of jobs need to understand that. I think that the person in the school board needs to understand it is not a job. It is maybe a 10 to 20 hour a month commitment with the school board meetings and getting prepared with your packages and those type of things. It's not, being just a school board member is not something that you're going to be able to live on being able to sustain yourself and your family. If you run for a state or federal office, you need to understand that there's travel that's going to be involved in it, that you're not going to always be here in the Valley, being able to go home at night. Sometimes it's going to wind up that you're being in Sacramento. You may have to wind up going to San Diego. If you're a federal officer, back and forth, going to Washington. So there's lots of travel that's involved in that. How do you matriculate through all of those types of variants that are present? And so I think that is also some of the things that people have to do when I talked about homework earlier. They need to make sure that what their personal lives can afford them fits into whatever the office that they aspire to. Being in Fresno Unified School Board and Clovis Unified School Board is going to be very different than being in Fireball School Board or in Kerman School Board. You've got one meeting a month in the rural areas, whereas Fresno Unified and Clovis, we have two, maybe even some months you have three board meetings in a particular month. And so I think people need to make sure they're attending meetings, that they're looking at agenda. If they can't go to meetings because it doesn't fit, that they're pulling up the agendas online, reading, going through the agendas and seeing the format. Also, you need to understand how these meetings run. A Fresno Unified School Board meeting is going to run very, very vastly different than a Kerman School Board district. It's just because of the size and those types of things. A city council meeting at Fresno for the city of Fresno, the city of Clovis, is going to be very different than a Selma city council meeting. And so you need to make sure that you understand the time commitment, making sure that whatever your personal life and your family life is going to be able to absorb that time and commitment that you're going to be making that's going to be away from them, away from home. The last thing you want to do is run for public office and have your family and your professional life fall apart because of something that you desire to do that you really didn't do your homework. Yeah, so your personal backgrounds, your history is all becoming public record now. You're aspiring to be a public official. And as a public official, your personal life, those things that you are doing currently, those things that you've done in the past, becomes open for criticisms, open for celebrations, and that includes divorces, bankruptcies, any run-ins that you've had with legal. It doesn't have to wind up always being an arrest and that you've been convicted of something. But if you got pulled over and stopped, you got parking tickets. You got 50 parking tickets in the city of Fresno, and you've only taken care of half of them. All of those types of things that you've done in the past will come up, and the public should know who you are in your background. I can share a personal deal. That for probably the last 10 years or so, I've struggled in the area of education and was looking to get out of Madera Unified, and actually thought I could secure a position in Visalia Unified. And I'm on my way to the board meeting in Visalia Unified to accept the position. I get a phone call when I get to about Selma Kingsburg saying that one of the board members had looked me up on the internet and pulled up the incident when I was running for city council, when I had the recount, and when I wound up, that was 2018. I wound up having a recount, thing wasn't going the way, I wasn't getting answers to my questions, people started to kind of ignore me, and I stuck my feet down and didn't cooperate. They had to wind up calling the sheriff's department. I wound up being placed in handcuffs for a period of time there at the facility. And because of that incident, this board member in Visalia said I wasn't the person that they wanted to have come down there and work in the school district. And so I didn't get arrested. It was basically a situation where I was around election materials. I could not be in there unsupervised. So I voluntarily told them, okay, since I'm not leaving, put me in handcuffs, and now I should be fine to be able to sit down and wait for my answer. So it's just things like that. All of those types of things, it's available and accessible and should be to the people who you want to work with. And so I think the 34 years I spent in public education have been great. They've been stellar. But for whatever reason, that incident in my political life kept me from getting that position. And so doesn't mean that you don't have people who wind up getting convicted of crimes and going and doing time, those type of things, who come out, they've changed their lives around, seen the woes of their previous lives and done things differently, and get elected and move into situations. We got now one of our national party candidates is a convicted felon as well, and he is running a race. And so I think those type of things are definitely open to public scrutiny. But ultimately, the public are the ones who are going to decide whether that person with that background, with that type of history, is the person they want to elect and put into that position. Please, 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 if you're going to be a candidate, understand the things that you've done in your past become public record, and it is open and available to those who you're aspiring to represent. So that is important, and you can't scrub it all. Some people now are trying to scrub their Facebook posts and those type of things. You can't scrub it all. Somebody else has got it saved. They downloaded it, kept it, and next thing you know, it comes up. But also, I think people who want to be candidates, what's going to happen when, if you were 17 years old and you got arrested for being under the influence, or you had a DUI, or those type of things? How do you respond to those questions? Can't say it wasn't you, because it was you at that particular time. You made a bad decision, whatever it is. How now do you respond to the public? I would suggest that you don't create a lie, don't disown it, but you got to find a way to be able to own that. Hopefully you've got examples since that bad decision where you can rely on to be able to share with the public to show the change that you made. But you are who you are, and we all have made bad decisions. We all have done some things. Maybe it's not a bad decision, but we've done some things that we wish we would have done differently. And you need to come up with a way and expect to have to be able to respond to those things when you get out into the public sphere. How your creator made you is a very, 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 could be a very big concern that you do have to be aware of. I tell people all the time, God made me with my three beings. I'm big, black, and bald. And so I always have to be aware of that as I'm going around. And what that means is that if I'm in a room full of women and I'm standing up to address them, I may wind up setting someone off just because of who I am and what it is. And so, I'm aware of that. So I know that if I'm in those type of settings that I'm going to probably sit as I do the presentation. If I'm in a room where I'm familiar with the people that are in there, maybe my vernacular, the words I use, the examples I share may be a little bit differently than if I'm in a truly public setting with an audience for the first time. And so I think that's one of the things is about appearance is who you are. You got to be comfortable with who you are. You got to know who you are, and you got to know that who you are and how you look doesn't work for everyone. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just something that you have to be aware of. And so I think that's number one, being comfortable in who you are and being aware of who you are. The thing with the dress is changing. I hate to admit this, but I would be, I guess, considered old school now. And so as an old school public servant, my facial hair neatly, I have a beard right now, but it's neatly groomed. I'm a bald head guy, so I try to keep my head bald as, cleanly groomed as possible. If I'm out in a public sphere, even if I have a shirt on like this, I probably will be wearing a jacket of some sort, even if it's blue jeans. For some reason, in my era, having a jacket on with whatever you're wearing kind of signifies that you're there for business, those type of things. But I say that hesitantly because things are changing. I believe it was 2018, 2019, for the first time in the past 80 years, we now have more Americans under the age of 40 than over the age of 40. And that's a fact. And so with that fact, that means that there are some things, some traditional things, some traditional methodologies that we use in politics that's going to change. And so I do know that facial hair now, people are growing their beards a little bit longer. If you have hair, it's okay now to wear it a little bit longer. Having braids is more acceptable. I think you still need to know your audience. If you're running for office in Clovis, you probably need to know what your clientele is and the area that you're in. Remember, Clovis Unified has had a dress code, a very stringent dress code for years. And so just know that when you're out there, there may be a higher level of expectation. If you are up in the mountains somewhere, if you're in one of the mountain areas and you don't own cowboy boots and you don't own a Western style shirt and you're always going in a 3-piece suit, that may not be the appropriate appearance and appropriate attire for that type of atmosphere. Conversely, if you're in the city of Fresno and you're an elected official and you're not wearing a suit and you're always in cowboy boots and you're always in your Wrangler jeans and all type of stuff, that may not be appropriate. And so got to be comfortable with who you are, got to be comfortable with how your creator has made you, but you also have to be aware of your audience and making sure that you have an array. And the only way you're going to be aware of your audience is if you've gone out and you've been around them at some point in time. We have different communities who are going to have different expectations, and it's up to us as individual candidates who want to serve that particular population to find out what it is, what are those expectations? How do they expect for me to talk? How do they expect for me to dress? All of those type of things. Communicate. Here's one of the other things also, and this kind of goes along with appearance and your communities. You've got some communities here in Fresno that are, and I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, that are illiterate. And we do a lot of things in signage and English. We send out a lot of notifications, type of stuff. And in some cases, some of the places, in particular on the south end of town, you've got some communities, people are illiterate, not just because they speak another language, but they just were not successful in school. So if you're always trying to communicate with a particular community in verbal languages to emails and what type of things, you're going to miss a group. Sometimes you just got to go and do it old-fashioned way, knock on the door, shake someone's hand. You don't kiss babies anymore because of COVID, but at least you can hug people and do those type of things, high fives and things. But in some cases, you need to know where the community is. And then as you're going into those type of communities, like I said, if you got a 3-piece suit on or some cowboy, that might not be the appropriate dress to be able to go in that area. But homework, making sure that you understand and know who you are as a candidate, as well as knowing those communities that you're going out into and what they expect from you as far as your delivery is very, 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 very important. Yeah, it's a necessary evil of campaigning. And the reason I say that is that unfortunately, I believe that the money in politics has corrupted it, has got us off track of being able to get quality servants for our particular communities that they aspire to serve. And so with that said, you have to be able to raise, you have to have some money. I'll talk about that in a second, but you also have to be able to raise money. So anybody who's going to be a candidate, you need to have some seed money. And what I mean by seed money is that when you go down to the county office of elections and tell them that you want to run for an office, they're going to give you a stack of papers, give you a deadline when you take that back. And when you bring it back, they're going to expect for you to have a checkbook with you to be able to pay some fees that it is. And we're talking, depending upon what the race is, could be $1,000 fees and registration, those type of things that you got to pay. You're also going to need to have some seed money to create a bank account. You have to start a bank account, which is going to take a couple of $100 that you're going to have to put that in there to that bank to be able to start that account. You want to have, when you make up your mind that you want to be a candidate, you want to have something in your hand, whether it's a business card, some type of simple little handout. That's going to cost you, $100, $200 to have something so that as you're meeting, every time you meet somebody, you're able to give them something about yourself. And that's just the startup. I'm not even talking about getting your social media presence out there, hiring the people that you're going to work with, a consultant, campaign managers, all of, treasurer, all of those other types of costs that come into it a little bit later. You cannot go become an effective servant if you do not have some money set aside. I would think probably $1,000, $1,500 you should be able to start off any campaign, in particular a local campaign. If you do not have access to that type of money, then you need to do some more homework, and maybe the next cycle, now that you understand that, you can save and get to that point. Because if you don't, you're going to be behind. You'll always be playing catch up. So fundraising also, one of the things of fundraising is that you got to know where to go. There are going to be organizations and groups that you've been part of who are going to support you. They're going to call for you. They're going to send out postcards. They're going to do emails for you stuff, but they don't have a dime to give you. So that is human capital, the human capital side of it. Where there's some other organizations that you'll go and meet, different entities, the labor counseling, as well as lots of community organizations who are going to give you money, but they may not be able to give you any human resources. And so you've got to be able to know where to get those types of things. If you are a progressive side of the ledger, you got to know also who you're going to have conversations with to practice. I know that there are some groups out there that are just because of who I am and what I do, they're not going to give me any funding. They're not going to support my campaign. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to go and have a conversation with them, because they still need to know who I am, because I'm aspiring to serve them. But you just need to know that. I'm a person in my individual life. A lot of cases, a no answer is better than a yes answer. Maybes are the killer for me. Maybes I can't do very much with. But if you tell me yes, we know where we are. If you tell me no, then I'm going to figure out a way to come back to you at some point in time to see if I can't change that no into a yes. And so I think awareness in fundraising, who to talk to, when to talk to them. I know one of the things that I wanted to talk about also is with the questionnaires and those type of things, and how that plays into fundraising also. But that's also a way that you can get funding is through the questionnaires that you're going to be receiving from different organizations. So also with fundraising, depending upon what your office is, if you're running for a Fresno Unified Edison area position and all of your money, the support that you're getting is coming from the city of Clovis, yeah, you're going to get lots of money and lots of support. But at some point in time, your opponent or somebody's going to bring up, hey, this dude, he hasn't done anything here in the community. He's not even supported by our community. His support, financial backing is coming from outside of our area. That's a huge red flag for organizations and individuals who are astute in the political game. So you want to make sure that whatever area you're running for, that you've got both human capital, human support, as well as the fundraising efforts that you're doing is concentrated in that area. Not solely in that area, but it is concentrated in that area, so that those people in that area know that who they're supporting and why they're supporting. Understanding what it is you're running for, all the details of that, the campaign is important. In California here, our primary election rotates. If there's a presidential election that's associated with it in that year, then the California primary is in March. If there is no presidential election in that year, then our primary goes back to June. That's important, that you understand the differences and when that happens, because if you're running for a city council race, a state race, or a federal race, you're talking about probably a 2-year window where you should be campaigning, actually talking to people, setting up your FPPC license, your number for that, so you can collect funds, expending things. The other part about it is here locally, I don't think there's any exceptions to this, but I believe here locally, all of the educational boards, so the school boards, State Center Community College, the other community college boards we have here, is a winner take all. So they will not be on the primary. You won't be running either in the March election or the June election. You're running for the November election. And at that particular time, it's winner take all. So if there is 2 candidates, whoever gets the most votes win. If there's 3 candidates or 4 candidates or 5 candidates, whoever winds up with the most votes is the person who wins that seat. And I think that a lot of people, I've had conversations with people who want to run for particular offices, and they don't understand the difference in that. So I think that's a huge necessity, is to understand what the process is, when the time frame is, when you're supposed to turn in your paperwork. If it's a runoff election versus the general election, when do you turn your paperwork in? All of those type of things is very, 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 very important that a person understands and that they know. I think one of the things, a practice that I borrowed from someone else, is that if I'm running for a particular board or position, is you have conversations with the other members of that board, whether they're rotating off or whatever, that you have a conversation with them. Even if I'm a member of the Democratic Party, when I was running for city council, I had a meeting that everyone except for one person, whether they were a Democrat or a Republican. We just had conversations about what it was like for them to be on the board, what kind of commitments, some of the things, the pitfalls they had, some of the successes they had. How do you work across the aisle with your other colleagues? I think that's very, 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 very helpful, and it helps your learning process. Everybody who goes into public office, you think you know what you're doing until you get in there and you actually get into the apparatus and operations of there. There's going to be a learning process. City council learning process could take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years before you get comfortable with all the different departments. Educational roles are probably a little bit faster than that, but still, I would say a year before you get to know all the different aspects of how the operations and the entity, especially if you're not in education. How do things get paid? How does this work? As a trustee, you can't just go to school A because they're in your area. Hey, I'm here, take me on a tour. That's not the role and responsibility that you have. And so there's a lot of, I think, understanding and background that needs to take place. A lot of work, preceding work that needs to be done if you're aspiring to be a candidate in a particular office. And I encourage everyone to do that. You need to take those small baby steps in order to get yourself ready to be effective if you're so blessed to be able to be put in that office.